Welcome back. Well, I want to remind everyone that we still have not been able to work out the speaker video, so apologies to our new set of speakers. But we want to welcome Amer, Elsad, and Danial Bunce, who will be giving the talk called Ransom Cartel, Possible Connection with REvil. You can take over.
Cool, thank you. Can everyone see my screen?
We can.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Today we're going to talk to you about Ransom Cartel. A little introduction. My name is Amer Elsad. I'm a senior threat researcher here at Unit 42. I specialize in threat intelligence and adversary tracking, and I'm joined today with my colleague Danial. I'll let Danial introduce himself.
Yep, hello. I'm a senior malware reverse engineer with Unit 42, focusing mostly on reverse engineering malware samples that we receive via incident response cases.
Cool. So before we talk about Ransom Cartel, I want to give a quick recap about REvil disappearance history as it relates to Ransom Cartel. REvil was getting a lot of attention from the media and law enforcement, especially after some high-profile attacks in the US. The FBI started going after the gang, and they even offered $10 million for information leading to the arrest of the REvil members. Eventually, some member got arrested and infrastructure was seized, and the leadership of the gang disappeared. And that led to a mistrust between the members of the group, and eventually REvil disappeared in October of last year. 2 months later, Ransom Cartel appeared. And in April this year, we noticed that REvil old blog started to become active again, but then they were redirecting victims to a new leak site. What was interesting about this new leak site is that, well, at the time of the redirect, it was unclear if REvil was rebranding the ransomware or this is a new operation. We noticed that the old victim that appeared on original REvil blog moved to this new leak site, and the operator of the blog did mention their connection with REvil, and even said that we offer the same yet improved ransomware. They also included a section, recruitment section, the one that you see in Russian here, listing the conditions, and then they're looking for affiliates to join their RRS. Some of the conditions that they listed was that they're looking for affiliate to deposit some part of money to be able to join this kind of, to prevent law enforcement and threat researcher from joining and getting intel on them. So talking about Ransom Cartel, the first victim that we observed from Ransom Cartel was in January of this year, but we have seen also evidence that they may have been active at least since December of last year. They impact both Windows and Linux, and we seen them using double extortion, but with a new approach. So they don't have a leak site where they shame victim publicly and upload data, but they do threaten to send the stolen data to competitors and to the media. As far as the ransom demands, it varies from victim to victim. We have seen demands as low as $20,000 and up to $500,000. And what's interesting is that we have seen them increasing their initial demands after they review the data. So if they initially ask for $500,000 and they sell the data and they find that it was valuable, they will come back and say, we want $1 million. We also seen them express interest in targeting organization that has annual revenue greater than $5 million. So from Unit 42 consulting cases, we have seen them gaining initial access to victim environment using compromised credentials. These are often VPN or RDB credentials. Once they're in the system, we have seen them using open source tools to steal saved credentials and steal credentials from memory. We have seen two tools being used, Mimikatz and Lasagna. One tool that we have seen them using called Don Pappy, we haven't seen this tool being used in any other ransomware attack. What this tool does is that it steals Windows Data Protection API credentials. So it search a machine for certain files that are known to be Pappy blobs. These are Wi-Fi keys, RDB passwords, and other credentials. and then they use this tool to harvest credentials. We have also seen them exploiting print nightmare vulnerability, and they were using a cracked version of remote access tool, legitimate remote access tool called BDQ inventory. They use that to execute commands on remote hosts. As far as exfiltration, we have seen them using rclone, and they uploaded the stolen data to Megasync and pCloud. So I know I went over this quickly, but if you would like a full list of TTPs that we've observed from Ransom Cartel and other IOCs, you can find this on our website, Unit 42, under the ATOMs. The ATOM stands for Actionable Threat Object and Mitigation. Whenever we research a threat, we will publish an ATOM that will include a list of TTP that we observed, as well as what industry they have targeted, region, and other information as IOCs. So as far as how ransomware as a service operate and focusing on Ransom Cartel, they operate just like REvil did. So there is a developer who did develop the actual ransomware, and they offer technical support, and they also have the standard infrastructure, including their communication site hosting. And then there's the affiliates. So the affiliates are random people, random cyber criminals. You don't have to be super technical or savvy. And then there's the victims. Each affiliate will target one or more victims using whatever techniques they want or can use. And then when the payment is made, it's cut between the affiliate and the developer. Usually the affiliate would get a larger cut and the developer will get a smaller cut. In the case of Ransom Cartel, we have seen them do the payment 80-20. So if the victim pays $1 million, the affiliate will get 80%, the developer will get 20% of that. And then there's the initial access broker. So like I mentioned, the affiliates are not super technical, so they take shortcut to breach organization. They rely on someone else, which we call initial access broker. And these are people who are more technical. They know how to exploit vulnerabilities, they know how to brute force. And then once they have access to our organization, they sell that to other threat actors. And we've seen them work a lot with ransomware, especially with Ransom Cartel. We have also seen crypto mixer. So crypto mixer is essentially a money laundering. Whenever the payment is made, they want to make sure that it's difficult to trace and it's useful. So this is another service that they also part of the gang. So talking about initial access broker, this is how Ransom Cartel gained access to victims, is working with initial access broker. So initial access broker, this is how they advertise their credentials on the dark web. We have seen the credential that are being sold, mostly being RDP, VPN, and SSH. Often the price is very cheap, and they work very closely with ransomware operators. So Ransom Cartel, when they compromise a victim, they will deploy a ransom node. Within the ransom node, they will provide an onion site. This is the communication site. And then they require authorized authentication to the website. They provide an ID and a key in the ransom node. And then once this is done, the victim will see this page. So this page will have the amount that they have, the ransom demand, and it will be in US dollar and Bitcoin. And they also will provide a discount amount that they call a discount amount if the victim pays within a certain amount of time. They also provide their Bitcoin wallet, and they also give some warning on the top. We have your personal data, we have encrypted your data. Don't try to reach to another third party. And they also say it's just a business. We don't have anything against you. And then there's a chat feature and a trial decrypt where they prove to the victim that we can decrypt your data. So for the ransom node, this is another indication that they have been developing their ransomware operations. So the one on the left, this is a ransom node that we have observed around January of this year. And the one on the right, this is a recent one that they have changed. So as you can see here, they have completely changed the language and the structure of it. In the new ransom node, they added more reassurance language for victim that once payment is made, we'll work with you and we'll help you protect your network and restore your files. We'll even tell you how we got in and help you kind of remediate and show you vulnerabilities and stuff like that. What's interesting about the first ransom node, the one on the left here is Ransom Cartel, and the one on the right is REvil. They both are identical. This is by itself is not an indication that there's a connection. We have seen it a lot that some ransomware operator would use similar ransom node, but this is just something worth mentioning. I will hand it over to Daniel now to talk about the code comparison and the overlap that we observed. Daniel?
Sure. So yeah, sticking with the theme of similarities between REvil and Ransom Cartel, the codebase provided a pretty unique perspective and allowed us to confirm that the samples of Ransom Cartel ransomware weren't just patched binaries as seen in the LV ransomware family, but instead a slightly modified version of the REvil ransomware encryptor. So each REvil binary contains an encrypted configuration, encrypted with the RC4 algorithm, and usually stored within a custom binary section, at least within the later samples of REvil. That decrypted configuration is structured with a JSON format with some pretty unique key names such as WHT, WFLD, and SVC. So these keys contain a range of information used by the ransomware, including a base64 encoded ransom note, public keys for encryption, as well as values that inform the sample whether to communicate out to a C2 server or simply to remain local on the machine. Ransom Cartel, on the other hand, uses an almost identical method of configuration encryption using RC4 for the main algorithm, but also encoding it with base64 as well. With this addition of base64, it tells us that there's an even smaller chance the file is patched, as it would require actually inserting the base64 decoding functions into the raw binary, which will definitely lead to numerous problems during execution. Once the Ransom Cartel configuration is decrypted, the config maintains the same JSON formatting, albeit with less values, so the domains and flag to indicate C2 communication is no longer present, but it does contain a list of processes and services to terminate, the ransom note information, and so on. It also contains the ransomware extension, so the extension to add to the end of the encrypted files. Now, both samples we looked at used a different extension, each randomly generated, so it wasn't really much to go off based on the extension alone. Outside of the configuration, we put a main focus on identifying overlaps in the assembly code itself. Now, REvil has historically used a pretty complex method of encryption, utilizing several elliptical curve cryptographic keys to generate values described as shared secrets, which eventually find their way into a core file encryption routine, utilizing the SALSA20 symmetric encryption algorithm. As well as the encryption setup being quite unique, the data appended to each file is far from common at around 232 bytes. This data blob contains the shared secret information, a unique ECC public key specific to the file, the SALSA20 initialization vector value, and a few more values that provide the decryptor with enough information to actually decrypt the file. Now, typically within ransomware, the header or footer consists of the encrypted file key, but with the case of REvil, they went pretty overkill in terms of development. And so for a threat actor to be able to copy the exact functionality byte for byte, it would be pretty time consuming, and they'd likely be better off using the source of another leaked ransomware family, such as Babuk. So comparing the footer and key setup functionality to the Ransom Cartel samples, there is an enormous overlap, with the code being almost identical aside from the same compiler, from some compiler optimizations. The algorithms in use, the internal structures, and hard-coded values are a one-to-one match across both samples of Ransom Cartel and the REvil encryptor. So as I mentioned before, while there are such big overlaps in the code and the fact that the REvil source code has not been leaked, key features inside the binary indicate that it's not merely a patched version, such as the LV ransomware family. So the first of these features is the minimal obfuscation found in the Ransom Cartel samples. So REvil used some pretty heavy obfuscation, encrypting strings and using API hashing to load API dynamically. This was not present within the Ransom Cartel's samples. Obviously, the modified configuration encryption is a big one. REvil only used a layer of RC4 without base64 encoding, so that had been inserted into the source code, likely before compilation. Additionally, REvil likes to store core information in the registry as well, shared as such as shared secrets and public key pairs. Within the Ransom Cartel, these registry keys have been modified, so while they could be patched, as there is no encryption present, it also indicates that it's likely not been patched. And finally, the reduced functionality within Ransom Cartel. As I mentioned before, the Ransom Cartel samples had fewer configuration values, including the lack of any communication references, such as communicating out to a C2 server. This is seen in the binary as well, with REvil containing some HTTP functionality, while Ransom Cartel doesn't. Again, similarly with the obfuscated import table, on the left, we can see the typical import table for a REvil ransomware sample. And on the right, we can see the Ransom Cartel import table, which lists plenty of imports. This isn't the entire table, but it gives us a lot of information about the file, such as calls to read file. We have registry related API, open the service manager, and several other API that indicate it's not been obfuscated in any way at all. The same thing goes for the strings. This is the Ransom Cartel sample. We have a clear indication that not only Salsa 20 is being used, we have a cartel string hard-coded into the ransomware itself, as well as some batch scripts and a few other indicators that we're dealing with ransomware, which if you were looking at any sort of REvil sample, you wouldn't be able to tell unless you went in and tried to reverse engineer the string decryption routines. The overlap that we've discovered is not limited to just Windows binaries. As with most ransomware threat actors, a Linux encryptor is a must-have. And similarly with the Linux encryptors, all of the strings of the Ransom Cartel encryptors are all visible, and there's no obfuscation at all in terms of API hashing and so on. So it's clear that they haven't simply gone in and patched a REvil sample. So there are some possible explanations as to what's going on here. So it's possible that the REvil source code was sold to affiliates or shared across to a certain number of individuals when the original actors stopped operations. Now, with the lack of obfuscation, it appears that the obfuscation engine used by REvil wasn't passed over. Otherwise, that would likely have been incorporated in the compilation process. So far, based on our research, it appears to be only in use by a single group. There are two public samples, and the main differences are the public key in use, which is pretty standard. Normally, it's generated per campaign to avoid any issues if one private key gets leaked, and that way you can only decrypt maybe one or two systems compared to the entire attack chain. Additionally, it doesn't appear to be used by a large number of affiliates as of yet, based on the lack of samples publicly available, as well as the fact that this family has been around for maybe a few months by now, and we would have definitely seen a lot more samples if it was being used by a large number of affiliates. It may be one or two affiliates, but nothing major on the original scale of REvil. And yeah, thank you for listening. I guess at this point, time will tell if operations of the Ransom Cartel group actually pick up, and if they choose to modify the code base even further to add any sort of anti-analysis techniques, obfuscation methods, and additional functionality. But at that point, that's pretty much it from my end.
Cool. Thanks, Daniel. That's it for us today. If there's any questions, we'll be sure to answer that in Discord. And thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much for that great talk. We appreciated it. And I hope people will bounce over to Discord and talk about it more with you. I think it's time we all have a nice 10 minutes. We can take a break until our 3 o'clock Central Time talk. Thank you to our speakers, and we'll see you after the break.